Welcome to BT Plus. This is the full, extended script in English, written in a continuous, professional narrative style for a smooth, single-take delivery. Imagine a scene from the early 19th century. The dust of battle fills the horizon, and a French soldier stands proudly among his officers, his right hand tucked into his waistcoat, his eyes tracing the borders of an empire upon which the sun never sets. This man is Napoleon Bonaparte, a figure who didn't just rewrite the map of Europe, but became the symbol of one of history's most famous psychological concepts, the Napoleon Complex. But have you ever stopped to ask, was Napoleon actually a victim of his short stature? Or was he the victim of the greatest propaganda campaign in history? Today on BT Plus, we dive deep into the human psyche to decode the myth of the short man who wanted to rule the world, uncovering whether it is a scientific reality or a British conspiracy that started with caricatures and ended in psychologists' offices. The story must begin with a shocking historical truth that will completely change your perspective: the historical trap. The common reputation embedded in our minds is that Napoleon was a tiny man, and this drove him to conquer continents to compensate for his physical deficiency. However, documented historical facts tell a different story. When Napoleon's body was autopsied after his death on the island of St. Helena, his height was recorded as 5 feet 2 inches. Here is where the geopolitical error occurred. The French inch at that time was approximately 2.7 centimeters, while the British inch was 2.5 centimeters. This slight difference in units led the English-speaking world to believe he was only 157 centimeters tall, when his actual height in modern units was about 169 centimeters. In the early 1800s, the average height of a French man was 164 centimeters. In the language of numbers, this means Napoleon was actually taller than the average man of his time. So, why has the short label stuck for 2 centuries? The credit goes to the brilliance of British wartime propaganda, specifically the cartoonist James Gillray, who created the famous character Little Boney. He depicted Napoleon as a tiny, angry child wearing a massive military hat and dragging a sword behind him while trying to swallow the globe. This campaign was so powerful that Napoleon himself later admitted that Gillray's cartoons did more to damage him than all the armies of Europe. Additionally, there was a visual illusion at play. Napoleon's elite Imperial Guard were handpicked for their height, with a minimum requirement of 180 centimeters. Standing next to these giants, Bonaparte naturally appeared small, even though he was of average height. Moving from history to psychology, the term eventually entered the clinic as the short man syndrome. The first to indirectly frame this concept was Alfred Adler, the founder of individual psychology. Adler wasn't just talking about height, he was talking about the inferiority complex. Adler argued that every human is born with natural feelings of inferiority, but when a person faces a tangible physical or social deficit, like being short in a society that glorifies height, it can trigger what he called overcompensation. A person who feels invisible in a room due to their stature might subconsciously adopt strategies to assert their presence, such as a booming voice, an authoritarian personality, or relentless ambition. The goal is not just to control others, but to convince oneself that they are not less than anyone else. If we look at history through this lens, we find a list of leaders who shook the world and are often cited as prime examples. Take Joseph Stalin. The man who ruled the Soviet Union with an iron fist was only 163 centimeters tall. He was obsessed with his image, reportedly wearing hidden lifts in his boots and using wooden blocks behind podiums to appear taller. Then there is Benito Mussolini, who adopted a rigid, hypermasculine posture and insisted on being filmed from low angles to look like a giant. Even in modern times, leaders who display extreme aggression while being shorter than average are often analyzed through the lens of this complex. But what does modern science say? Is this just a stereotype or a genuine psychological trait? In 2007, the University of Central Lancashire conducted an experiment placing men of different heights in physical confrontations and provocative tests. The results were surprising. It was the taller men who lost their tempers faster and were more likely to use their physical strength when provoked. This suggests that the Napoleon Complex might be a confirmation bias in our own minds. When a tall man gets angry, we say he is assertive, but when a short man acts the same way, we immediately say he is compensating for his height. However, we cannot ignore the Oxford University study that utilized virtual reality. When volunteers were made to feel 25 centimeters shorter than their actual height inside a virtual train, they began to report lower self-esteem and increased feelings of paranoia, sensing that people were watching them with derision. This proves that shortness itself can trigger a defensive, aggressive stance as an evolutionary survival strategy. In evolutionary psychology, it is believed that shorter men, unable to defeat giants through raw strength in ancient times, developed dark triad traits, narcissism and Machiavellianism, to compensate through social manipulation and political dominance. The Napoleon Complex, at its core, is a struggle against unfair social standards. We live in a world that statistically links height to success. Studies show that taller men often earn higher salaries and reach leadership positions faster. This hidden discrimination is what creates the real psychological pressure. But ultimately, Napoleon Bonaparte did not lose because of his height. He lost due to the complex calculations of Waterloo. Yet, he won the battle for immortality, proving that greatness is not measured in centimeters, but by the impact you leave behind. The real complex is not in the physical stature, but in how we see ourselves in the mirror of a society obsessed with appearances. True stature is measured from the head to the sky, and Napoleon, whom they mocked for his height, has his name etched in history, while the names of the executioners who tried to belittle him have long been forgotten. Thank you for watching this deep dive on BT+. Tell us in the comments, do you believe this complex exists in reality? Or is it just a social injustice? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon, and we'll see you in the next episode.